As you learn more about how to create and maintain an inclusive, caring campus community, it is important to know UCCS policy prohibits discrimination and harassment, including when it comes to sex. In this video, we will be discussing the university's sexual misconduct policy and prohibited behaviors, as well as provide some examples of smart moves to help keep yourself and others safe. Some of the language or examples used in this video may be difficult or uncomfortable for some of you to hear. We encourage you to access the resources that may be most helpful to you, and there are several listed on the handout you've been provided. The University of Colorado Sexual Misconduct Policy is administered by the Office of Institutional Equity, OIE, which is also home to the Title IX coordinator. This policy prohibits sexual assault, dating and domestic violence, sexual exploitation, stalking, and sexual harassment. These policies govern on-campus behavior occurring during any UCCS program or activity, or off-campus, where the conduct could negatively impact the UCCS community. The policy complies with all applicable federal and state laws, including Title IX and the Violence Against Women Act, also known as VAWA in short. Despite its title, all individuals, regardless of sex, gender expression, and gender identity, are protected. VAWA requires that universities provide students with information to help prevent, report, and address sexual misconduct. And that is one of the reasons you are participating in this training. We also care about you, and we want you to be safe. We'll start with explaining sexual harassment.
Sexual harassment is a specific form of discrimination and harassment based on sex, which can include gender, gender identity, gender expression, and sexual orientation. In order for behavior to be considered sexual harassment, it must first be unwanted or unwelcome. Consensual flirting is not prohibited, but it may not always be appropriate. Sexual harassment can be verbal, nonverbal, like gestures, or physical. It can happen between people who have no relationship or between people who know each other in some way, and it can happen between people of all genders. There are two types of sexual harassment. The first comes from the Latin phrase quid pro quo, which means this for that, and it occurs when a person in a position of authority demands sexual favors from someone as a term or condition of their education or employment. This could sound like, I'll give you an A, or I'll give you a pay raise if you go out with me. It is quid pro quo harassment if engaging in or rejecting such conduct is the basis for a decision resulting in a tangible educational or employment action. The second type of sexual harassment is hostile environment. This is similar to the protected class hostile environment that you learned about in the previous video. However, this harassment only occurs on the basis of sex. The harassment must be so severe, persistent, and/or objectively offensive that it would interfere with someone's ability to participate in their educational or employment program or activity. Examples of hostile environment include unwelcome touching, offensive jokes about sex or individuals based on sex, or sharing explicit photos with someone who did not ask for them. Consider this scenario. One of your friends, another student, is talking to you about being stressed because someone in one of their classes keeps trying to flirt with them. Someone you don't know joins the conversation and says to your friend, "I know what you need, cutie," and they start massaging your friend's shoulders. Your friend looks very uncomfortable. What do you think about this? It's easy to tell that the person who joined the conversation engaged in some questionable behavior. First, they refer to your friend as cutie. This could be interpreted as being based on sex. It was also said in the context of this person touching your friend. And your friend looked uncomfortable, which tells you the behavior was unwelcome. Now, what if this person is assigned to work with your friend in a group project? This can make your friend feel like they don't want to go back to class and/or can't do their best at work because they are worried about facing more unwanted advances. This is an example of something that is a hostile environment, and we'll talk about some ways you can help your friend later. Next, we're going to talk about stalking. Stalking is a type of harassing behavior directed at someone that causes them to be fearful or suffer emotional distress, and the behavior would cause a reasonable person to fear for their safety or the safety of others. Or it could cause a person to suffer substantial emotional distress. Some things to keep in mind about stalking are that many songs and shows make fun of it, but there's actually nothing funny about it. Stalking does not only mean following someone around, and it doesn't always include making direct threats. It can include things like sending repeated, unwanted messages, attempts to follow someone's private channels or pages, or creating fake profiles to do so, showing up at places someone has tagged in their social media, and leaving messages or gifts for someone on their car, their home, or place of work. Remember, even if someone does not mean to make someone else feel scared, intent does not matter. Any concerns about stalking should always be reported as soon as possible to police or the Office of Institutional Equity, because stalking can sometimes lead to more escalated behaviors.
Another prohibited behavior, and something college students don't always think about, is sexual exploitation. Sexual exploitation is conduct that takes sexual advantage of another person without their consent. Examples of this include prostituting another person, taking possession of the intimate personal property of another person without that person's consent, such as taking someone's underwear, recording images like videos or pictures or audio of another person's sexual activity, intimate body parts, or nakedness without that person's consent, including in a space where they have a reasonable expectation of privacy, and sharing the images or audio with others without the person's consent. Even if the video or recording was made or shared consensually, that doesn't automatically give permission for it to be shared with others. And trying to get money from someone to keep it from being shown is also sexual exploitation. It can be embarrassing and scary if any of these things happen, but don't let that stop you from getting help from the police or the Office of Institutional Equity. Next, we're going to review sexual assault. Sexual assault is any attempted or actual sexual act directed against another person without consent of the victim, including instances where the victim is incapable of giving consent. There are 4 types of sexual assault that we will summarize here. Fondling, sometimes referred to as non-consensual sexual contact, is touching someone's private body parts for sexual gratification without their consent. Rape, or non-consensual sexual intercourse, is sexual penetration by another person or object without consent. Statutory rape, sexual intercourse with a person under the legal age to give consent. And incest, sexual intercourse between relatives. The full policy definitions of these types of sexual assault can be found in your handout. There can be times when sexual contact occurs that was unintentional or intentional, but not for the purposes of sexual gratification. Unintentional sexual contact could happen if you're at a crowded concert and someone's hand or back brushes up against your butt as they try to get through the crowd. Intentional contact with private body parts not for the purposes of sexual gratification would be in the context of a doctor appointment for a legitimate examination that is explained to you step by step.
Whenever there is touching of private body parts, it must be lawful, and everyone has the right to decide for themselves what is okay and not okay. This brings us to the important topic of consent. When it comes to sex and sexual interaction, nothing should happen that you don't want. In the sexual misconduct policy, consent means affirmative consent, which is unambiguous and voluntary agreement to engage in a specific sexual activity. Consent is clear, knowing and voluntary words or actions that create mutually understandable, clear permission of willingness to engage in and the conditions of sexual activity. This means both people want something to happen, and their words and actions very clearly show that. Consent must be active. Silence by itself cannot be interpreted as consent. Consent is not effectively given if it results from the use of force, including threats or intimidation, or if it is from someone who is incapacitated. The policy also says, a person who does not want to consent to sex is not required to resist. Consent to some forms of sexual activity does not automatically imply consent to other forms of sexual activity. Silence, previous sexual relationships, or the existence of a current relationship do not imply consent. Consent cannot be implied by attire or inferred from the giving of acceptance of gifts, money, or other items. Consent to sexual activity may be withdrawn at any time, as long as the withdrawal is communicated clearly. Withdrawal of consent can be manifested through conduct and need not be a verbal withdrawal of consent. In order to give effective consent, the person giving consent must be of legal age under Colorado law for the purposes of determining whether there was a sexual assault, and that even if a person is intoxicated by intentional use of alcohol or drugs, this won't count as an excuse if they do something to someone else without that person's consent. Consent is one way to show respect. And especially when you are new to exploring sex, or you're thinking of making things physical with someone new, you want to be sure it's fun and safe. What is the best way to understand if someone else wants the same thing as you? Communicate. College students come from lots of different backgrounds and have varying levels of interest and experience with sex. Don't make assumptions about someone else's knowledge or experience, and remember, it is the responsibility of the person initiating each sexual activity to get consent before proceeding. Now, how do you know you have consent? An enthusiastic yes is one way. Body language can be another. For instance, if you lean forward for a kiss and the other person meets you there with a smile or their lips, you've got it. How do you know when you do not have consent? It's pretty easy if someone says no. If that happens, you need to stop everything immediately and check in to see what needs to change. They might not say things like maybe or I don't know. There is no middle ground in sex. If it is not a yes, it's a no. But it's not always easy for someone to say no out loud. They might move or push away. They might just stop being as into it as they were previous times or even moments before. Or they might seem tired or out of it or fall asleep from exhaustion, drugs, medication, or alcohol. All of these things mean no, and you need to stop immediately. If someone insists on using a condom or other type of protection, unless they communicate something has changed, that means you need to use it the whole time. When you're in the mood, make a smart move and get consent.
We covered the importance of consent and how it is one way to show respect. Agreement and respect are also important in relationships. What are some things partners do in a healthy relationship? Thank you for your attention and participation. At their core, a healthy relationship is one that you are happy to be in, and you work together with your partner to meet each other's needs. A healthy relationship is best described as interdependent. Interdependence means you rely on each other for support, but you still maintain your own identity as a unique individual. You know that you have your partner's approval and love, but your self-esteem does not depend on your partner. Not every relationship is perfect, but in your relationships, you should feel respected, supported, and safe. We certainly like to think about the good things that happen in relationships, but not every relationship starts off with or maintains mutual respect, and instead there is one person exerting power and control over another. We want you to be able to recognize behaviors that signal someone is in an unhealthy relationship and how to get help. 1. Verbal abuse can include name-calling, spreading rumors, making threats to hurt someone or their pets or other family members, yelling, using a loud, intimidating tone, and demeaning, insulting, or humiliating them. If a person is verbally abusive to their partner, more often than not, it is a sign that they may escalate their behavior to other forms of power and control, and possibly even violence. 2. Emotional abuse includes setting unfair expectations, jealousy, controlling what they watch or they say, withholding affection, isolating them, cheating on them or accusing them of cheating, blaming them for things they didn't do, and blackmailing. In LGBTQIA+ relationships, one person may threaten to out another if that person is not open about their identity or sexual orientation. 3. Economic abuse can include withholding money, stealing money, and restricting the use of money or access to food stamps, transportation, or other resources. 4. Physical abuse can come in the form of slapping, hitting, pinching, burning, forced eating or drinking, or withholding food, water, or medication, blocking someone to keep them from leaving, sleep deprivation, or throwing objects at or near someone. 5. Sexual abuse can include non-consensual sexual activities like rape, coercion, saying that they owe you sex or making you feel guilty if you say no, unwanted attention, and harassment.
We hope that you and those you know do not experience the behaviors we just talked about. However, because it is a possibility, we want you to know what to do if it does and how you can get help, support, or advice if it happens. We never want you to be afraid to report, so we have support and safety measures we can put into place. These range from free resources to housing and academic accommodations to no contact orders and on-campus employment accommodations and counseling services. You do not have to file a formal complaint or engage in any campus resolution process to receive support or safety measures through OIE. Also, regardless of where it occurred and who was involved, if you are a student, you have access to our resources. For instance, UCCS Police can provide you with information on obtaining a protection order through the El Paso County court system. UCCS will enforce existing protection orders. You are encouraged to report any incidents of sexual misconduct to the police, the Office of Institutional Equity, or both. If you are uncomfortable with reporting an incident, you can talk confidentially to the UCCS Wellness Center. They can also provide confidential services before, during, or after a report. You can call UCCS Police directly at 719-255-3111. Colorado Springs Police at 719-444-7000. The OIE at 719-255-4324, and the Wellness Center at 719-255-4444. These and other resources are included in your handout. When sexual assault happens, it is normal for a victim to have mixed emotions and questions about what happened. Here are some tips for someone who has been sexually assaulted. You do not have to go through this alone. Remember, you have the right to choose who you tell. Don't throw evidence away. Do not shower. Try not to urinate. Urinating may reduce the ability to detect any date rape drugs. If there was oral contact, do not smoke, eat, drink, or brush your teeth. Do not change your clothes. If you have already changed your clothes, place them in a paper bag. Plastic bags may destroy the evidence. If you haven't changed, keep the original clothes on and bring an extra set to wear home from the hospital. Go to a hospital with the capability of providing a rape kit, also known as a sexual assault nurse examination, and request the exam. In Colorado Springs, you will need to go to Memorial Main Hospital on Boulder Street. You will have several reporting options, including the choice to file an anonymous report. There may be costs associated with the hospital visit. If you are worried about that, the UCCS Wellness Center can provide advice and may be able to talk to your nurse during the exam. The hospital may provide you with a victim's advocate who can provide additional support. We know that this is a lot to take in, so we have provided more detailed information on these procedures in your handouts.
What happens when a report is made? OIE is the primary office for addressing sexual misconduct involving students. When OIE receives a report, we reach out to the person who experienced the unwelcome behavior to provide them with information about resources, including options for reporting to the police, and offer to meet with them to discuss their experience. We know we can never undo what happened, but we can look at what happened and try to prevent it from happening again. Sometimes this means we conduct a formal investigation in order to determine if the policy was violated. In a formal investigation, all involved parties receive due process and are treated equitably. It is possible for a police investigation and a university investigation to happen at the same time, for one and not the other to occur, or neither to occur. Keep in mind they are different, and the OIE can help answer any questions about the differences. With regard to the sexual misconduct policy, If someone is found responsible for violating the policy, they will receive disciplinary action, sometimes called sanctions, through the appropriate campus authority. For students, this is the Dean of Students' office. For employees, it is Human Resources. Other departments may be involved as they apply, such as athletics, clubs, or other campus-affiliated organizations. The OIE is not responsible for punishing or imposing discipline on anyone and partners with other campus authorities as appropriate to help make UCCS a safe place for all. If someone is found not responsible, they may face no sanctions or disciplinary action. Sometimes, behavior outside the scope of the investigation is reported and is referred to the appropriate campus authority. Some people worry about false reporting. It is a violation of these policies to knowingly file a false complaint or provide false information during an investigation. However, filing a complaint or reporting something that turns out not to be a policy violation is not considered false reporting if you do it in good faith. If you ever have any questions or concerns about a report, you can contact OIE and they will help. Sometimes people are afraid to make a report because they don't want to be retaliated against. Retaliation is prohibited and means an adverse action that is taken against someone who has made a complaint to OIE or participated in an OIE investigation. If you are concerned about retaliation, contact the OIE. Other things to know about OIE. We are not a confidential office, but we respect the privacy of individuals' information and may only disclose it to others if they have a need or right to know. As a friendly reminder, faculty and most staff, including coaches, resident assistants, and academic advisors, are considered mandatory reporters, and they must report any known or suspected discrimination, harassment, or retaliation to the OIE. If OIE contacts you, you can be sure that whatever the reason, we are doing our best to provide you with the support and resources you need to be successful. There is no time limitation for when you can report to OIE. Sometimes it takes people time to process their experiences and recognize that what happened could be discrimination or harassment. If you are ever unsure and just want to talk to someone, you can always reach out to a confidential resource. A confidential resource is someone who is not required to report to the OIE and can instead listen and connect you with other resources that might help. Students can contact the Wellness Center to speak with someone confidentially. OIE lists other community and national confidential resources on our website as well. Thank you for your attention. We know this was a difficult topic to discuss. In our next Smart Move video, you will learn some different ways to be a good bystander, as well as how to help a friend in need.